Well, I realized this morning one of the benefits from the time of our pandemic. You no longer have missiles, and you do not know if I took the long form or the short form of the gospel. And the sacristy, I was being lobbied to take the short form of the gospel because everyone knew either way it's the long form of the homily. But I opted for the long form of the gospel. I hope you have hope. Yesterday, two very different experiences, but related. Yesterday, early afternoon, I went to one of our parishioners who is near death. We were told probably a day or two in hospice care. Very active parishioner, someone I've known myself for over 25 years, has become a great friend. And I sat with her at the nursing home, completely sedated, so I could talk as long as I wanted, it would have no further effect. And a beautiful experience. About an hour, they allowed me to be there to pray with her and to say those things that I suppose when someone we're close to we want to say, when we know that they're going home to the Lord. It was a beautiful experience, a very peaceful experience, a sorrowful one, certainly left in tears. Even said to the young man from the activities department, I said, after 29 years of being a priest, when you're on the other side, it still isn't any easier, when a loved one is passing away. And later on in the evening, I was talking with friends of mine, and they related a story of one of their neighbors who called them asking for prayer. They had both just retired, looking forward to what many retired people look forward to, some time of rest, going to travel and so on. And shortly after they both retired, the husband was diagnosed with a pretty serious form of cancer. And so their retirement now has become doctors and chemotherapies and some concern over, why is all this happening to us? What did we do to deserve this? Maybe a little fear over the future. I'm going to guess probably all of us have been there at some point in time, huh? If it be our own illness or an illness of a loved one or some other, very serious issue in our life, panic can sit in, or anger at the Lord, why is this happening? And questioning, maybe even some fear. Well, if you really take all that, that's what's going on in the gospel today. Of course, we have a healing story within a healing story. And St. Mark, I think I would have gotten along well with him because he goes into great detail over everything. And even though these two healings are accounted for in other gospel traditions, Mark gives us details that are not present in any of them. And we do have a healing story within a healing story. We hear about the woman with the hemorrhages. We hear that she suffered for 12 years. 12 years. And there's probably, some panic or questioning that went on in her life. We hear that she exhausted her savings going to doctor after doctor, but did not get any healing. Finally, Jesus comes. She touches the tassel of his cloak and is healed. To her credit, it appears that she has great faith. She knows that all I have to do is touch that tassel of the cloak. I'm going to be okay. But then what do we hear? Fear set in. Why? Jesus turned immediately and said, "Who touched me?" He knew the healing power went. And so in fear, she spoke with him. Fear. The 12-year-old girl, oddly, the same number. The woman with hemorrhages suffering for 12 years. The young girl also 12 years of age. And we hear the parents are what? They're kind of in panic. Our daughter is dying. Come to the house. We need you to heal her, please. There's almost a hopelessness When Jesus arrives, the neighbors are there. The family and the friends are gathered. They're crying and wailing that the daughter has died. They ridicule Jesus, really, when he says she's just asleep. She hasn't died. And then, of course, Jesus heals. And he uses the Greek word, which translated to English means arise, and the exact same Greek word is the word Jesus uses of himself to describe his own resurrection. Very important. Simple question maybe for us all is to simply question, how is it that we enter into difficult moments? How is it that we enter into those challenging times of our life, if it be an illness of a loved one, our own illness, or some other real crisis? How is it that we enter into it? I remember many years ago, it was right after 9/11 happened, my mother became very ill and began 2 years that she was, kind of on the decline, going towards the point of physical death. And I remember when we finally took her to the hospital, especially if you have a good old-fashioned Polish mother, they will not go to the doctor or to the hospital. So when I got home that day and she asked to go to the hospital, I knew we were in trouble. And so immediately, as the gospel said twice, immediately as we were getting ready to go to the hospital, I called one of my parishioners who happened to be third in command in the hospital to be sure he would be at the ER when we arrived and that mother would be looked at immediately. And that took place. And through the course of time, I certainly orchestrated different physicians and rehab and so on to make sure that I was going to take perfect control of the situation. I remember the second day she was in the hospital, they called, of course, saying, we don't think she's going to make it. And so, I went to the hospital. The doctor was pleading with me, a very good Irish doctor, said, your mother really needs to be intubated. Will you please convince her? She has all of her mental faculties. I can't go against her will, but can you convince her? And I said, I will not try. And I said, my mother is Polish. She's made up her mind. That's it. It's done. A month later, my mother walked out of the hospital. And the same physician said to me, I guess your mother was right. She didn't need to be intubated. I said, she usually is. But it began really 2 years. And I remember that day driving home from the hospital, that second day where things were not so good, calling one of my friends. I kind of had a meltdown in the car. I was crying, talking, and he said, where are you? I said, well, I'm on the Kensington. He said, for the love of God, pull over. I will come and get you, And I said, no, I'll make it home fine. But I remember the day that my mother passed. I had been spending the night at home for a couple weeks because we knew the time was near. But that one particular night, the most important one, she was doing so well during the day, I said, I'm going to go home tonight. And in the morning, on my way into the office at the Catholic Center, of course, getting the call. And I called one of my friends and said my mom had passed away. And he said, are you okay? And I said, yes, I am. I no longer have control, and I no longer have to worry. She has gone home to the Lord. I was perfectly at peace. It took me 2 years to go from being in control to allowing the Lord to be in control. And maybe one of the challenges that we have is in those moments of difficulty and challenge, we still always want to be in complete control. And what we need to do is to, in prayer and reflection, with the help of others, give all of those things over to the Lord. And the complete faith that that woman with the hemorrhages had, to give over that control and have that absolute faith and trust in the Lord. And so maybe this week we just reflect on our own past experience of difficult moments, or maybe there's a challenging one going on right now in some of our lives. How is it that you enter into it? Are you able to really work through that process to have that absolute faith? And I think what is key is to have real faith and trust in the resurrection. People without faith have no hope because everything is just of this world. But for those of us who are here, we have every reason to have hope. Why? Because we believe in life eternal. And as challenging as it is to allow a loved one to go home to the Lord, it ultimately is our faith and a moment maybe to try to rejoice too, that they have gone home simply ahead of us. We mourn for ourselves, I suppose, at that time, but are we able to rejoice for the one who has gone ahead of us to the kingdom? Do we really believe that we will one day arise? Just as Jesus used that word for that little girl of 12, arise, the same word for his resurrection, and the same word used as Jesus calls us to share in his resurrection in the heavenly kingdom.